Since 16, I supported myself. 2 jobs, no vacations, and bought a house at 24. At a family BBQ, Mom screamed, "You stole your brother's future!" A week later, my parents sued me. The rest was hilarious. Mom threw the salad spoon on the table, pointed her finger at me, and yelled at the top of her lungs, "You stole your brother's future!" I stood there with a glass of cheap wine in my hand, not understanding what was going on. The guests froze around me. Aunt Carol with her mouth open, the Millers, our neighbors, who had just been laughing at one of Dad's jokes. Everyone was looking at me. I felt my cheeks burning. "Mom, I didn't—" "Shut up!" Angela was trembling with rage. "You did it on purpose. I bought this apartment before him on purpose, so he would feel like a loser." I looked over at my brother. Kyle was sitting on the bench with a beer in his hand, staring at the grass. He didn't look up. My father stood by the grill, nodding silently. He supported my mother. "Dad," I tried to address him, "I was just working. I didn't—" "He can't get himself together right now," Matthew interrupted me. "He sees that his sister has surpassed him. It's hard for him." I took a step back. I felt something break inside me. We were standing in their yard, surrounded by the smell of grilled meat and smoke, and my mother was yelling at me as if I had killed someone. I'll start from the beginning. Otherwise, you won't understand how crazy this all is. I'm 24. I work as an administrator at a Zara store in a shopping mall on the outskirts of town. Not the best job, not the worst. The salary is a little above minimum wage. The hours are irregular. But I'm used to it. I started working when I was 16, first as a cashier in a grocery store. I stood at the register for 8 hours a day after school, smiled at customers, counted change. My parents said it was good. I would learn responsibility. Kyle was 17 at the time, finishing school and getting ready to go to college. He didn't need to work. He needed to study. I wanted to go to college, too. But when it was time to apply, my father said, "Lana, why? You're going to get married and have children anyway. Why waste money on education?" My mother nodded. "Kyle needs more. He's a man. He needs to build a career." I didn't argue. I just got a second job as a waitress in a cafe, morning shifts at the grocery store, evening shifts at the cafe. I slept 5 hours a day. I thought, if I'm a good daughter, if I don't cause any problems, someday they'll notice me too. Kyle went to college. He went for 2 years and dropped out. He said it wasn't for him. My father got him a job at his construction company. He has a small company with several crews. Kyle started working there part-time. Nothing serious, no responsibility. But my parents were happy. "Our son is working with his father. That's wonderful." I moved to Zara when I turned 19. Administrator A little better pay, official employment. I opened a bank account and started saving, $100 a month. Sometimes more, if I took extra shifts. Sometimes less, if my mom asked me to help with the bills, because I helped, always. When my mom didn't have enough money for groceries, I gave her some. When the bills had to be paid, I paid them too. "In a family, we're all in this together," my mom used to say. I believed her. Kyle didn't give anything. He spent his salary on beer and weekend trips with his friends. His parents didn't ask him about money. He needed to relax. He worked hard. I worked too. But I was a girl, and girls have to help. It took me 8 years to save up for the down payment, $20,000. I gave up everything. New clothes, vacations, going to cafes with my friends. I lived with my parents so I wouldn't have to pay rent. I rode an old bike because I couldn't afford a car. I wore Zara uniforms to work and old jeans and t-shirts that I bought on sale at home. My colleagues went to parties, dated guys, and went to the beach. I counted every dollar. I remember once my friend Tess asked me why I never went anywhere with them. We were sitting in the staff room during our lunch break, eating sandwiches. Tess took out her phone and showed me photos from last weekend. They had gone to the lake and rented a cottage. "You never go anywhere, Lana," she said. "Do you ever take a break?" I shrugged. "I'm just saving up." "For what?" "For an apartment." Tess laughed. "Seriously, you're still young. Live a little." I didn't answer. She didn't understand. She had parents who paid for her education, bought her a car, and helped her with rent. I didn't have parents like that. I had myself. When I turned 23, I started looking at apartments. Nothing special. A one-bedroom on the outskirts in an old building. But mine, I could pay half up front and take out a mortgage for the rest. I calculated everything down to the cent. The monthly payment would be a little more than what I had been saving, but I could manage. I would take on more shifts. I didn't tell anyone. I was afraid. I knew my mother would say, "What about us? Who will help us?" So I kept quiet. I took out a mortgage, signed the papers, and got the keys. And only then, at that barbecue, did I tell them. It was a Sunday at the end of July, a hot day. My parents had a barbecue in the yard and invited relatives and neighbors. I rode my bike over and brought a salad I bought at the store on the way. My mom kissed me on the cheek. My dad nodded. Kyle sat on a bench with a beer, looking at his phone. We ate and talked about trivial things. Aunt Carol talked about her new job. The Millers discussed renovations to their house. I was silent, holding a glass of wine and thinking about when would be the best time to say it. Finally, when everyone had relaxed a little, I plucked up my courage. "Mom, Dad, I have news," I said. Angela turned to me. "What is it?" "I bought an apartment." Silence, brief but palpable. Then Aunt Carol smiled. "Wow, Lana, congratulations." But Mom didn't smile. She looked at me with an expression as if I had just said something offensive. "Bought?" she repeated. "When?" "Last week. I closed the deal." "And you didn't tell us?" "I wanted to surprise you." Angela slowly put the spatula down on the table. Dad froze, too. Kyle looked up, looking at me for the first time all evening. "You bought an apartment," Mom repeated. "By yourself, without consulting us." "Well, yes, I earned it myself." And then she exploded. She threw down the spatula, pointed her finger at me, and shouted the words I will never forget. "You stole your brother's future!" I didn't know how to respond. I stood there with a glass in my hand and looked at her, not understanding. "What? You heard me. You bought the apartment before him on purpose, so he would feel like a failure." "I didn't. I was just working." "Shut up." Angela was trembling. "You've always been selfish. You've always thought only of yourself. What about your brother? He needs to buy a place too, but now he sees that his sister has surpassed him, and he can't pull himself together." Father nodded. "He's depressed because of you, Lana. Do you know how hard it is for him?" I looked at Kyle. He was staring at the ground, clutching a beer bottle. His face was red, his eyes cloudy. He was drunk. Again. "Kyle," I said quietly, "do you really think that?" He didn't answer. He just sat there silently. Mom kept yelling that I was cold, that I never thought about the family, that I did it on purpose. The guests began to gradually disperse. Aunt Carol muttered something about it being late and quickly left. The Millers left too. No one wanted to witness a family scandal. I tried to explain that I didn't want to prove anything to anyone, that I just worked, saved up, and bought an apartment, that it was my life, my money, but my mother wouldn't listen. "You've always been like this," she yelled. "Always." I couldn't take it anymore. I put my glass on the table and left. I just turned around and walked across the yard to the gate. My mother shouted something after me about ingratitude and selfishness. I didn't turn around. I got on my bike and rode away, tears streaming down my cheeks. All week I walked around in a daze. I worked, came to my new empty apartment, lay on the floor and stared at the ceiling. The phone rang several times. My mother, my father. I didn't answer. I didn't know what to say. And then, a week later, the postman came. He handed me an envelope. I opened it while standing at the door and felt my legs give way. A court summons. Plaintiffs, Angela and Matthew Kershaw. Defendant, Melania Kershaw. Reason for the lawsuit, moral damage and ruined life chances for their son. I sat down on the floor by the door, holding the paper in my hands. I read it over and over again. My parents had sued me. They claimed that I had deliberately bought the apartment to ruin my brother's life. They demanded compensation. I sat on the cold floor of the empty apartment I had spent 8 years of my life on and couldn't believe it was real. I found Dara Wicks online. I searched for cheap family lawyer. Her office was on the second floor of an old building in the center, above a Chinese restaurant. It smelled of fried noodles and something sour. Dara turned out to be a woman in her 50s with short gray hair and glasses on a chain. She sat at a desk covered with papers and drank coffee from a paper cup. "Sit down," she nodded at the chair opposite her. "Tell me your story." I sat down and put the summons on the table. My hands were shaking. "My parents are suing me." Dara took the summons and scanned the text. Her eyebrow twitched upward. "For moral damage and ruined life chances of their son," she read aloud. "Seriously?" "Seriously." She put the paper down, took off her glasses, and rubbed her nose. "How old are you?" 24. "And your brother?" 25. "And they claim that you—" She looked at the summons again. "Systematically humiliated him, bragged about your earnings, created psychological pressure, as a result of which he fell into depression and was unable to fulfill his potential. Is that true?" "No." I barely held back my tears. "That's not true. I just bought an apartment." "I worked for 8 years, saved up, didn't tell anyone. And then I told them at the barbecue, and my mother started screaming that I had stolen my brother's future." Dara looked at me silently. Then she poured herself some more coffee from the thermos. "Okay, tell me everything from the beginning. Don't leave out any details." I told her about how I started working at 16, how my parents never believed I could achieve anything, how I helped them financially while Kyle gave them nothing, how I kept my plans to myself because I knew they wouldn't understand, how I bought an apartment and told them, thinking they would be happy, and they sued me. Dara listened, nodded, and occasionally took notes. "Have you seen your brother in recent years? Have you talked to him?" "Hardly. He worked for my dad on a construction site and came home late. We lived in the same house, but we hardly ever saw each other. He didn't talk to me." "Did you ever brag to him about your earnings?" "No, never. I never told anyone how much I earned." "Did you humiliate him?" "No, I didn't even know he was depressed until my mother yelled at me." Dara put down her pen and looked at me. "Okay, we need evidence, bank statements for all those years, to show how much you earned and how much you saved. Also, statements showing how much you gave your parents. Witnesses, if any, colleagues, friends who can confirm that you worked hard and didn't brag. Correspondence with your parents or brother, if any. Anything that can prove your version." I nodded. "How much will it cost?" Dara named the amount. It was less than I had feared, but still significant. I calculated in my head that I would have to give up buying furniture for the apartment for a few more months. "Okay," I said. "I'll pay." For the next 2 weeks, I gathered evidence. I went to the bank and ordered statements for the last 8 years. I sat at home and leafed through them, looking at the numbers. Here I transferred $200 to my mom for groceries. Here, $350 for utilities. Here, $100 for Dad's birthday. Page after page, year after year. It came to a total of $12,342. I didn't even realize it was such a large amount. I called Tess, my colleague from Zara. I asked if she could testify in court. "About what?" Tess asked in surprise. "About how I worked a lot, that I took extra shifts, that I didn't brag about money." "Lana, what happened?" I told her, briefly. Tess was silent for a long time on the other end of the line. "Oh my God," she finally said. "That's crazy." "I know. Of course I'll testify. No question." I also called the manager of the grocery store where I worked as a cashier. She agreed too. She said she remembered me. A quiet girl who never complained and always took extra shifts. Dara looked through all the documents and nodded. "Okay, that will help. But be prepared for them to try to paint you as selfish, cold, ambitious. They'll say you never cared about your brother, never supported him. You need to stay calm and answer honestly." I nodded, but inside, I was trembling. The night before the trial, I didn't sleep. I lay on a mattress on the floor. I hadn't bought a bed yet, and stared at the ceiling. I thought about seeing them tomorrow. Mom, Dad, Kyle. They would sit there and tell the judge what a bad person I was, and I would have to listen to it. In the morning, I put on the only suit I had, dark blue, bought on sale a few years ago. I put on a little makeup so I wouldn't look completely exhausted. I rode my bike to court. Dara was waiting for me at the entrance. She was also wearing a suit and looked respectable. "Are you ready?" she asked. "No," I answered honestly. "It's okay." No one is ever ready for things like this. We entered the courthouse. The corridors smelled of old wood and something official. People walked back and forth with folders, talking in hushed voices. I could feel my heart pounding in my throat. I saw them at the door of the courtroom. Mom, Dad, Kyle. Next to them stood a man in an expensive suit, their lawyer. I looked at him and thought, where did they get the money for a lawyer like that? Dad always complained that business wasn't going very well. Mom noticed me. She turned away. Dad did too. Kyle stood a little apart, looking at the floor. He looked bad, thin with wrinkles under his eyes. He was wearing an old jacket that I remembered from school. We were invited into the courtroom. I sat next to Dara at one table, my parents and their lawyer at another. Kyle sat next to them. There was a distance of about 5 meters between us, but it felt like kilometers. The judge entered, a man in his 60s, gray-haired with a stern face. We all stood up, then sat down again. He asked my parents' lawyer to present the essence of the lawsuit. He stood up and cleared his throat. "Your Honor, my clients, Mr. and Mrs. Kershaw, are suing for moral damages caused to their son by the defendant, his sister. Over the past few years, the defendant has systematically humiliated the young man, bragged to him about her earnings, and created an atmosphere of competition within the family. As a result, he fell into depression, lost motivation, and was unable to realize his plans to buy his own home. The defendant deliberately bought an apartment before her brother to emphasize his inability. I listened and couldn't believe my ears. It sounded as if I had really done something terrible. The judge asked for witnesses to be called. My mother was the first to come forward. She sat down in the witness chair and wiped her eyes with a handkerchief. The lawyer asked her about me. Mom started to speak, her voice breaking. "Melania was always a cold child," she said. "Not like other girls. She never talked to us about her life. She never shared. She just worked and worked. And when Kyle came home tired, she would sit at the table and count money. He saw that and felt like a failure." I clenched my fists under the table. It was a lie. I never counted money in front of him. I rarely counted money at home. I did it at the bank or at work. "She never thought about her family," Mom continued, "only about herself. And when she bought the apartment, she didn't even tell us. She just presented us with a fait accompli." Kyle was devastated. The lawyer sat down. Dara stood up. "Ms. Kershaw," she said calmly, "did your daughter help you financially?" Mom hesitated. "Well, sometimes." "Sometimes?" Dara repeated. "How many times? Once a year? Once a month?" "I don't know. I didn't keep track." Dara walked over to the table, picked up the folder, and took out some papers. "I have here bank statements from the defendant for the last 8 years. According to them, she transferred a total of $12,342 to you for groceries, utility bills, gifts. Does that mean anything to you?" Mom was silent. Her face reddened. "And how much money did your son give you during that same period?" Silence. "Mrs. Kershaw?" He worked for my husband. He didn't have to give us money." "Why?" "Because he was building his career." "And your daughter wasn't?" Mom didn't answer. Dara returned to the table. The next witness called was Dad. He said almost the same thing as Mom, that I was selfish, that I never cared about my brother, that I bought an apartment on purpose to make him feel worse. Dara asked him, "Mr. Kershaw, tell me, does your son work for your company?" "Yes." "How much does he earn?" My father named a figure. It was almost twice as much as my salary at Zara. And how much of that money did he save for housing? I don't know. You don't know. But you claim that he wanted to buy an apartment and was planning to do so. What makes you think that? He talked about it. He talked about it. But he didn't save up for it? The father was silent. Then Kyle was called in. He stood up and walked over to the chair. He sat slumped, not looking at me. The lawyer asked him how he felt when he found out that I had bought an apartment. Bad, Kyle said quietly. I felt like I had lost. Why? Because I'm older. I should have bought it first. Did your sister remind you about that? Kyle hesitated. No, but I saw that she was saving up, working more. And that made you feel bad? Yes. Dara stood up. Mr. Kershaw, tell me, have you been in touch with your sister in recent years? Not really. Why? Just didn't have time. Did she tell you how much she was earning? No. Did she brag about her success? No. Did she tell you that you were a failure? No. Then why do you think she's to blame for you feeling bad about yourself? Kyle was silent. He stared at the floor. Mr. Kershaw? I don't know, he said quietly. It just happened that way. Dara called Tess and told her that I always took extra shifts, never complained, never bragged about money, that I was quiet and hardworking. Then they called the manager from the grocery store. She confirmed the same thing. Dara showed the judge the statements, my earnings, my savings, my transfers to my parents. Everything was documented. My parents' lawyer tried to argue that money wasn't the main thing, that the main thing was the moral atmosphere in the family. But the judge interrupted him. I see no grounds for the lawsuit, he said. The defendant had the right to buy an apartment with her own money. There is no evidence that she deliberately humiliated her brother or put psychological pressure on him. The lawsuit is dismissed. Mom cried. Dad stood up silently. Their lawyer wrote something down in his notebook. Kyle sat staring into space. I stood up too. I felt empty. No joy, no relief, just emptiness. We left the courtroom. My parents walked away without looking back. Kyle followed them, but turned around for a moment. He looked at me. He nodded guiltily. I didn't respond. Dara patted me on the shoulder. You won. Yes, I said. I won. But it didn't feel like a victory. Not at all. After the trial, I blocked their numbers. All three of them. Mom, Dad, Kyle. I just went into my phone settings and pressed block. Easy. One touch of my finger, and they were gone. I moved into my apartment for good. I took my things from my parents' house. Clothes, books, a couple of photos. I went there when I knew no one was home. Dad was at the construction site. Mom was at the store. Kyle was who knows where. I packed everything into 2 large bags and left the house keys on the kitchen table. I didn't write a note. What was I supposed to write? I bought cheap furniture at IKEA. A mattress, a table, 2 chairs, a small sofa. I assembled everything myself, even though the instructions were confusing and my hands were shaking. Screws fell on the floor. I cursed out loud, but kept going. When I finished, it was already past midnight. I sat down on the new sofa and looked around. My apartment. My space. No one to yell at me. No one to accuse me of something I didn't do. But I didn't feel relieved. Only emptiness. I went to work, smiled at customers, arranged things on the shelves. Tess sometimes came up to me and asked how I was doing. I said, fine. She looked at me doubtfully, but didn't press the issue. What could I tell her? That my family hates me? That I won the court case but feel like I lost? In the evenings, I lay on the sofa and stared at the ceiling. I ate pasta with ketchup because I didn't have the energy to cook. I didn't cry. I just lay there. A week passed, then another, then another. I got used to being alone, to the phone not ringing, to not having anyone to tell about my day. And then, one evening, there was a knock at the door. I was already in bed, watching a TV series on my laptop. It was almost 11 o'clock. Who could be coming at this hour? The knock repeated, louder. Then I heard a voice. Lana, Lana, open up, it's Kyle. I froze. My heart started beating faster. Lana, please, I need to talk. I didn't want to open the door. I wanted to lie quietly until he left, but he kept knocking. The neighbors would start complaining. I got up and went to the door. I opened it just wide enough for the chain. Kyle was standing in the hallway. He looked terrible. His eyes were red, his hair was disheveled, and he was wearing the same old jacket he had worn in court. He reeked of whiskey and sweat. He could barely stand. "What do you want?" I asked coldly. Can I come in? I need to talk." "No. Go home. Lana, please, it's important." "I don't care." I couldn't take it anymore. His voice broke. "I couldn't. I need to tell you." I looked at him through the crack in the door. He looked broken. Broken. Part of me wanted to slam the door. Another part, the part that still remembered him as a little boy when we watched cartoons together, shuddered. I took off the chain. I opened the door. "Come in," but not for long. Kyle stumbled inside. He walked into the living room and collapsed on the sofa. He covered his face with his hands. I stood at the door with my arms crossed over my chest. "Talk. What did you want to say?" He was silent. His shoulders shook. "Kyle?" "I lost everything," he blurted out. "Everything, Lana. Everything." "What did you lose?" He raised his head. His eyes were wet, his face contorted. "Money. My father's money." $120,000. I didn't understand right away. I just stood there and looked at him. "What?" I gambled at an online casino for the last 3 years. At first it was just a little betting on sports, poker. I thought I had it under control, but then I got hooked. I couldn't stop. He began to talk. The words poured out, confused, with pauses. How he started gambling 3 years ago. How at first he won sometimes, and it made him feel like he could do it. That he wasn't a loser. Then he started losing. He took out loans. He borrowed from friends. Then his friends stopped lending him money, and then he stole money from his parents. From an old business account, he said. Dad hadn't used it in a long time, but the money was still there. I thought I'd win it back, that I'd pay it all back and no one would find out. "But you lost," I said emotionlessly. "Yes, everything, every penny." He cried. Real tears, not theatrical ones. He wiped them with his jacket sleeve. "Your parents still don't know?" "No." I told them I took the money for an investment, for some project. They believed me. My dad sometimes asks how the project is going, and I say everything is going well, just slowly. I slowly walked over to the chair opposite him and sat down. I looked at him. And the depression. All this talk about you not being able to get your act together because I bought an apartment. Kyle lowered his head. "It's a lie. I mean, the depression is real. But it's not because of you. It's because of the debts. Because of fear. I didn't know what to do. And when you told me about the apartment at that barbecue, I saw a way out." "A way out?" I thought, if Mom and Dad believe that it's because of you, that you humiliated me, then maybe you'll help me. Out of pity, you'll give me money. I sat there and couldn't speak. My head was empty, completely empty. "You wanted me to give you my money," I finally said. "I didn't know what to do, Lana. I have debts. The debt collectors are calling, threatening me." "Did you think about me?" My voice rose. "When my mother yelled at me in front of everyone? When they dragged me to court?" Kyle was silent. "Did you know they were going to sue me?" I didn't think they would go that far. But you didn't stop them." I was afraid that if I told the truth, they would find out about the money. Anger. So strong that my hands trembled. I stood up. "Get out," I said quietly. "Lana, get out of my apartment now." "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." "I don't care what you meant," I shouted. "You let them destroy me. You sat there and said nothing when Mom said I was a cold, selfish person. When Dad said I ruined your life. You stayed silent in court. And all so I would give you money for your damn casino. Kyle cried even harder. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Go, just go. He stood up, swaying. He walked to the door. He turned around. I'm a bad brother, I know, but I didn't know any better. Go, Kyle. He left. I closed the door behind him and locked it. Then I slid down the wall and sat on the floor by the entrance. I hugged my knees. I stared at the wall. I didn't cry, I just sat there. I don't know how much time passed. An hour? 2? Then I got up, went to the bathroom, and washed my face with cold water. I looked at myself in the mirror. My face was pale, with dark circles under my eyes. I went to bed. I didn't sleep until morning. The next day, I didn't go to work. I called in the morning and said I was sick. My manager didn't ask any questions, just asked me to bring in a doctor's note later. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. I didn't eat. I didn't turn on my phone. I just lay there. In the evening, the phone rang. I hadn't set the lock again after talking to Kyle. The screen displayed, Mom. I didn't pick up the phone. The phone rang and then went silent. A minute later, it rang again. Mom again. I didn't answer. Then Dad. I didn't answer that either. Mom. Again. I turned off my phone. The next day, I didn't go to work either. I lay there, watching TV shows without paying attention to the plot. I ate cookies I found in the kitchen cupboard. On the third day, I turned on my phone. 10 missed calls from Mom, 5 from Dad, 2 from Kyle. No voicemails, but there was one text message from an unknown number. Lana, we need to talk. It's very important. Kyle confessed to something terrible. We need your help. I read the message once, then again. Then I deleted it. So he did tell them about the money, about the casino, and now they want me to help. Of course. Who else to help? But kind Lana, who always solves everything? I blocked the new number, turned off my phone again. I went out onto the balcony. I leaned on the railing and looked down at the street below. People were walking, cars were driving, life as usual, and mine was in ruins. I thought about what Kyle had said, that he saw me as a way out, a scapegoat to throw all the blame on, and my parents picked up on that. Because it's easier. It's easier to blame me than to admit that their beloved son is a thief and a gambler. It's easier to believe that I'm a cold egoist than to face the truth. I stood on the balcony and there was nothing inside me. No anger, no pain, only emptiness. The next day, I went to work. Tess came up to me during lunch. Lana, you look terrible. Are you okay? Yes, I said. I just caught a cold. She didn't believe me, I could see that, but she didn't insist. I worked. I arranged things. I smiled at customers. I did my job. And in the evening, I came home to an empty apartment. I cooked pasta. I watched TV series. And I didn't answer my phone. The phone rang for a few more days. Mom, Dad. Then it stopped. They gave up. Or realized that I wouldn't help. I sat on the couch and thought, this is it, my new life. Without family, without support, just me. And I didn't know how to live with that. They came to my work a week after those text messages. I left after my shift. It was already 7 in the evening, dark. The shopping center was emptying. People were rushing to their cars. I was walking to the bike rack, thinking about what to make for dinner. Probably pasta again. And then I saw them. Mom and Dad were standing at the entrance. They were just standing there, waiting. Mom was wearing an old jacket, no makeup, and looked much older than I remembered. Dad, too, stooped, grayer, with dark circles under his eyes. I stopped. I wanted to turn around and leave through another exit, but my mom had already noticed me. Lana, she shouted, wait, please. They came toward me. I stood still, clutching the strap of my bag. I have nothing to talk to you about, I said when they got closer. Lana, please. Mom reached out her hand but didn't touch me. We need to talk. No, we don't. We found out, Dad said quietly, about Kyle, about the money. I remained silent. He told us everything, he continued, about the casino, about the debts. about what he stole from us. So what? I asked coldly. Why are you telling me this? Mom started crying. Real tears, not theatrical ones like in court. We need help, Lana. He's being threatened by debt collectors. They know where we live. They call every day. They say that if we don't pay back the money, then... That's not my problem. He's your brother. I laughed, bitterly, briefly. And I'm your daughter. But you took me to court. Dad looked away. Mom wiped her tears with her sleeve. We were wrong, she said. We didn't know the truth. Kyle lied to us, and we believed him. You believed him because you wanted to believe him, I replied, because it's easier that way. It's easier to blame me than to admit that your beloved son is a thief. Don't say that. Why? It's the truth. Mom sobbed. Dad finally looked at me. Lana, I understand that we hurt you, but that's not the point right now. He's in real danger. We have to pay off the debt, otherwise... How much? I interrupted. They exchanged glances. $120,000, Dad said, plus interest. It's almost $140 now. I nodded. And you want me to give you that money? Not all of it, at least part of it. We'll sell the house, but that will take time and the collectors won't wait. I stood there and looked at them, at my mother who was crying, at my father who couldn't look me in the eye. Part of me wanted to help. It was an old habit, being a good daughter, solving problems, avoiding conflict. But another part, a new one that had emerged somewhere between the trial and Kyle's visit, was firm. No, I said. What? I won't give you any money, not a cent. But you chose him. My voice didn't tremble. Always, all these years. He was more important, his dreams, his future. And me? I was just a girl who would get married and have children. I wasn't worth your attention, but I'm worth the money, right? That's right. You didn't come to ask for forgiveness. You came to ask for money. You don't regret what you did to me. You regret that now you need my help and I'm refusing. Mom wiped her face. You don't understand. We're in real danger. They could... Live with it, I interrupted. Like I lived with you taking me to court. Like I lived with Mom yelling at me in front of all the guests. Like I lived with you never believing in me. I walked past them to the bike rack. Mom shouted something behind me, but I didn't turn around. I got on my bike and rode home. My hands were shaking as I held the handlebars. At home, I sat down on the couch and cried. For the first time in all these weeks, I sobbed, pressing a pillow to my face so the neighbors wouldn't hear. I don't know why I cried. From pain, from relief, from finally telling them the truth. But I didn't regret it. Even through my tears, I didn't regret it. The next few days were difficult. I didn't sleep well. I lay in bed, stared at the ceiling, and thought about them. I imagined them sitting at home, the phone ringing, my father answering the debt collectors. I felt guilty, an old nagging guilt. Maybe I should have helped? Maybe just a little? They're family. But then I remembered my mother's scream at the barbecue, the court, Kyle's face when he confessed that he wanted me to give him money, and the guilt receded. One evening, as I stood on the balcony with a cup of tea, I heard a voice from the neighboring balcony. This is the first time I've seen anyone here. I turned around. On the neighboring balcony stood a woman of about 38 with short dark hair, wearing a medical uniform. She was smoking a cigarette, leaning on the railing. I just moved in, I replied. Rebecca, she waved her cigarette. I've been living here for 3 years. Nurse, 1 kid, ex-husband is a jerk. The standard set. I smiled involuntarily. Melania, or Lana, administrator at Zara, no children, asshole family, also standard. Rebecca laughed. Well, at least we have something in common. We started talking. At first, we talked about trivial things, neighbors, nearby stores, the elevator that was always broken. Then Rebecca invited me for coffee. I agreed. Her apartment was similar to mine, but cozier. There were toys on the floor, drawings on the refrigerator, and the smell of coffee and something baked. My son is with his dad for the weekend, Rebecca explained as she poured coffee, so I can afford to sit quietly. We sat on her couch, drinking coffee. Rebecca talked about work, difficult shifts, challenging patience. I listened and nodded. Then she asked, "So what about your jerk family?" I hesitated, but something in her direct gaze, in the way she didn't embellish her story, prompted me to be honest. I told her everything. About the barbecue, the court case, Kyle, my parents at work. Rebecca listened without interrupting. When I finished, she leaned back on the couch. "Your family is toxic," she said simply. "You don't owe them anything." "But they're family." "So what? Family doesn't give them a right to your money or your life. They'll squeeze you dry and not even say thank you. Trust me, I know what I'm talking about. My father borrowed money from me for years. He never paid me back. And when I finally refused, he didn't talk to me for 2 years. And you know what? I felt better." I looked at her. "But didn't you feel guilty?" I did. For the first few months, very much so. But then I realized that guilt is their weapon. They use it to control you, but you don't have to carry their problems. Those words stuck with me. I repeated them to myself as I walked home. You don't have to carry their problems. But the guilt didn't let go so easily. At night, I still lay awake, thinking about them. I imagined debt collectors at their door, Kyle hiding in his room, Mom crying. I knew I was doing the right thing. But then, why did it hurt so much? A week later, Rebecca suggested I see a psychologist. "I went after my divorce," she said. "It helps you sort things out in your head." I found Leah Corbin through a free consultation at a local center. She turned out to be a woman of about 45, with a soft voice and an attentive gaze. Her office smelled of lavender. "Tell me what brought you here," she said at our first meeting. I told her. It was the 3rd time in the last month, but this time was different. Leah didn't judge or give advice. She just listened and asked questions. "Why do you feel guilty?" "Because I could have helped. I have money in my account. But that money is yours. You earned it." "Yes, but they are my family." "The family that sued you." I was silent. "Melanie," Leah said softly, "you have the right to say no, even to your family, even when they need help. It doesn't make you a bad person." Tears. Again. "But I feel bad." "I know, and that's okay. You grew up in an environment where you were expected to sacrifice yourself, but now you're an adult, and you can choose." We met once a week. Leah helped me sort through my feelings, understand where the guilt was coming from. She taught me to say no without explanations, without excuses. Slowly, it got easier. Not quickly, not dramatically. Just a little easier every day. I started decorating my apartment. I bought plants, small cacti that are hard to kill. I put them on the windowsill. They looked lonely there, but alive. Rebecca dragged me to yoga. I laughed when she suggested it. "Yoga? Seriously? I've never been that kind of girl." "Now you can try it," she replied. I went. The group was small, and the teacher was a calm woman who didn't insist on perfect poses. I couldn't do half the exercises. I fell down. I laughed at myself. But it was good. Just good. Tess introduced me to her cousin Jake. 28 years old, worked in a warehouse. We met for coffee. He was nice, talked about his job, his hobby, collecting old vinyl records. I felt comfortable. But when he suggested meeting again, I felt I wasn't ready. Not now. I hadn't recovered enough to let someone into my life. I thanked him honestly. "You're great, but I'm not in a place to date right now." He nodded and smiled. "I understand. If you change your mind, let me know." In the evenings, I sat on the balcony with tea, looking at the city. Sometimes Rebecca came out onto her balcony, and we talked over the railing. About work, about life, about little things. The phone stopped ringing. My parents gave up, or found another way to pay off their debts. I didn't ask. I didn't want to know. One evening, Leah asked me, "How are you feeling now?" I thought about it. Lonely, I answered honestly, but not empty. Not empty anymore. She smiled. That's progress. And it was true. I wasn't happy, but I was free. And I was learning to live with that freedom. A year and 3 months had passed since the day my parents came to see me at work. I was living, just living, going to work, talking to Rebecca, sometimes meeting up with Tess after my shift, going to yoga, no longer falling over in every pose, even starting to enjoy it. My cacti on the windowsill grew, and I added a few other plants, a fern that somehow survived, and a succulent that Rebecca brought with the words, "So it won't be so lonely." The guilt receded. Not completely, but it no longer suffocated me at night. I learned to live with it like an old scar. It's there, but it doesn't hurt anymore. I hardly thought about them. Sometimes, when I saw families on the street, parents with children, brothers and sisters laughing together, something stirred inside me, but it passed quickly. I found out what had happened to them by accident. It was Saturday and I went to a small bakery near my house to buy bread. There was a woman standing at the cash register. I didn't recognize her at first, but then I remembered. Aunt Carol, my mother's sister. The same one who was at the barbecue. She recognized me too. She froze with a loaf of bread in her hand, then nodded. "Lana." "Carol," I replied neutrally. We stood in line silently. Then she turned to me. "How are you?" "Fine," she nodded, looking past me. "Do you know about them?" "Who?" "Angela and Matthew. Kyle." I was silent. Carol sighed. "They sold the house 3 months ago to pay off Kyle's debts. Now they live in a rented apartment on the other side of town. Small, 2 rooms. Kyle is with them." I listened, feeling nothing. "Does he have a job?" I asked. "He got one recently, as a mover, but the pay is low. Matthew closed his company and now works for someone else. Angela." She paused. "She's aged a lot. She looks bad." I nodded. "I understand." Carol looked at me. "Don't you want to see them?" "No." "They're your family, Lana." "They were," I corrected her. "Once." The line moved forward. Carol ordered her bread, paid, and left without looking back. I bought bread and went home. In the evening, I sat on the balcony with tea, thinking about what I had heard. The house was sold. They live in a small apartment. Kyle works as a mover. I expected to feel something satisfaction, regret, but there was nothing. Just emptiness on a subject that had previously taken all my strength. Rebecca came out onto her balcony and smoked a cigarette. "What are you thinking about?" I told her. She listened and nodded. "How do you feel?" "Nothing. It's as if it didn't happen to my family, but to someone else's." "Maybe it is," said Rebecca. "Maybe they're not your family anymore. And that's okay." I thought about it. Maybe she was right. A month later, Kyle showed up again. It was Sunday morning. I was drinking coffee in the kitchen when I heard a knock on the door. Not aggressive like last time, calm, polite. I looked through the peephole. Kyle, alone. Sober, it seemed. I opened the door, leaving the chain on. "What do you want?" "Hi, Lana," he said quietly. "Can we talk? 5 minutes?" He looked different. Thinner, older than a year ago. Dark circles under his eyes, but his gaze was clear. He was wearing work jeans and a plain t-shirt. I hesitated. Then I removed the chain. 5 minutes. He came in and stopped in the hallway. He didn't ask to come in further. "I didn't come to ask for money," he said immediately. "I didn't come to ask for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it." "Then why did you come?" "I wanted you to know that I'm trying to fix everything. I got a job as a warehouse worker. The pay isn't great, but it's honest. I've been going to Gamblers Anonymous meetings for 6 months now. I haven't gambled once in that time." I listened silently. "My parents sold the house. They moved into a small apartment. It's my fault. I ruined everything. I know." "Kyle, let me finish, please. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm not asking you to come back. I just wanted you to know that I realize what I did, and that you were right back then. You were right to refuse us. We didn't deserve your help." He fell silent. I looked at him. At my brother, whom I once knew, who now looked like a stranger. "I'm glad you're trying," I said finally. "I'm glad you realize it, but I need time. Maybe we'll talk again someday, or maybe not. I don't know." Kyle nodded. "I understand. I don't have the right to ask for more." He turned toward the door, then paused. "If anything, Mom and Dad are sorry too. They don't say it, but I can see it. They understand what they've lost." "Okay," I said simply. Kyle left. I closed the door behind him and stood in the hallway, listening to his footsteps recede down the corridor. I didn't cry. I didn't feel anything in particular. I just went back to the kitchen and finished my coffee. And I realized I'm no longer the girl who was afraid of hurting someone by saying no, not the one who sacrificed herself for others. I've changed. A week later, Rebecca asked me for a favor. "My kitchen outlet is broken. I called an electrician, but I'll be at work when he comes. Could you open the door for him and show him where the problem is?" I agreed. The electrician came on Wednesday afternoon. He was a man of about 32, tall with calloused hands and a calm face. He had blonde hair, cut short, not handsome but pleasant. "Lauren," he introduced himself. "Rebecca said the outlet is sparking?" "Yes, in the kitchen." I showed him. He opened his toolbox and started working. I stood to the side, watching him quickly and confidently dismantle the outlet. "Have you been an electrician for long?" I asked, to fill the silence. "About 10 years. And you?" "Me?" I laughed. "I'm not an electrician. I work at Zara. I'm an administrator." "That's a difficult job, too," he said without looking up. "People are different." They are. We talked while he worked, about little things, about work, about the neighborhood, about the elevator breaking down again. He was calm, not trying to impress me. He just talked. When he finished, I offered him coffee. "Rebecca doesn't mind," I said. "I was making some for myself anyway." He smiled. "Why not?" We drank coffee in Rebecca's kitchen. Lauren talked about his job, about strange customers, about how he had recently bought an old motorcycle and was trying to repair it. "You ride a motorcycle?" I asked in surprise. "Sometimes, when the weather is nice. It's like freedom, you know? You just ride and don't think about anything." I understood what he meant. As he was leaving, he said, "If something breaks down at your place, here's my card. Rebecca has my number, but just in case." I took the card. I thanked him. In the evening, Rebecca called and asked if everything was okay. "Yes, Lauren fixed the outlet. He's a good electrician. And not only that," she said with a smile in her voice, "he's a good person in general." "Rebecca." "What? I'm just saying. If you ever want someone to talk to, he's a good option. Calm, honest, no nonsense." I laughed. "I'm not looking for anyone." "I know, but if you ever do, think about it." I thought about it. A few days later, I sent him a text message. "Hi, this is Lana. We met at Rebecca's. Would you like to go to the movies together this week?" He replied an hour later. "Hi, sure. Why not? When is convenient?" We went to the movies together on Friday. We watched some action movie, nothing special. Then we went to a cafe, drank coffee, talked about the movie, about life. Lauren talked about his motorcycle, about how he was going to ride it to the mountains in the summer. "Do you like traveling?" he asked. "I don't know. I've never really traveled. I've been working all the time." "Maybe you should try it." I smiled. "Maybe." We met a few more times. Nothing serious, just coffee, walks. Lauren didn't pressure me or try to get close to me quickly. He was just there, calm, without drama. I had no illusions. I didn't imagine weddings, children, the future. I just allowed myself to get to know him, and it was nice. One evening, I was sitting on the balcony with a cup of coffee. I was looking at the city, the lights in the windows, the cars on the street, people walking home. I was thinking about how much I had been through this year, about the barbecue where my mother yelled at me, about the trial, about Kyle, who came home drunk and confessed everything, about my parents at work, about how I said no to them, about the guilt I carried for months, about Leah, who taught me that the guilt wasn't mine, about Rebecca, who showed me that it was possible to live without toxic people, about Lauren, who was just there, asking for nothing in return. I wasn't happy in a fairy tale sense. I didn't have wealth. I didn't have reconciliation with my family. I didn't have the perfect husband who would solve all my problems. But I was free. I lived for myself. And that was enough. The phone rang. Lauren. Hi. Want to go for coffee tomorrow? I smiled. Sure, why not? We agreed. I put down the phone and finished my coffee. I looked at the city. Family doesn't always mean love. Sometimes it's just the people you grew up with. And your real family is the ones who are there for you when times are tough. Rebecca Tess Lee. Even Lauren, whom I've only known for a few weeks, I chose myself. And it wasn't selfish. It was survival. I got up and went into the apartment. I watered the plants on the windowsill. They had grown and looked healthy, just like me. Not perfect, but alive. And that was enough. Was I wrong to turn my family down? Can what they did to me be forgiven? And should it be? I don't know the answer. Maybe you do. Maybe you have a story similar to mine. All I know for sure is that I did what I had to do. I chose myself, and I don't regret it anymore.